Hello, everyone. Today I'm here with Bruce Lyon. Welcome, Bruce. I have invited Bruce because he gives me this undeniable feeling of charge inside, like not in what he brings from outside, but next to him, there is something sparkly and alive comes up in me. And aside from being a highly intelligent person with a worldview, planetary and cosmic, and broadly educated in questions of economy, ecology, and all the good things. So yeah, I'm inviting a cosmic and planetary worldview into the conversation today. Hello, Bruce.
Hello, Katya. Thank you for inviting me. And I love that in this time it's really challenging to the heart that you're doing something like this, that you're taking action and engaging it with your heart and your conversation. So I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah, that's where I come from. I'm sitting and watching crisis unfolding that's touching me deeply because it involves my country and my sister country. And it's just painful to watch how one hand is scratching my other hand with a knife. And it's bringing hopelessness, helplessness, fear and misunderstanding. And so I'm looking for guidance and direction. What can we do here when we're in so much pain? And why is it? For what?
Yeah, and certainly, it's affecting the world heart, and there's a place, I think, inside everybody's heart that can't believe this, just can't believe that we're still doing this as a species, and it's good for us to feel that before we move to understanding or reasons or arguments, which we've been very good at for a long time. To actually feel the heartbreak of it is such an important piece because it allows us to access something deeper than our minds. There's something emerging in all of our hearts that's part of us as one humanity that is just not okay. The heart is not okay with it. It doesn't want the arguments about why. It just wants to say, I'm suffering. Something in me is suffering, and my heart is calling me to listen because something's emerging in our heart. So I want to talk about the fact that humanity as a being, is emerging now. It's emerging in every heart, and all war is civil war. All war is, in a way, some part, like you say, your hand is cutting your other hand, that some part of humanity is at war with humanity. And I think this feeling that many of us are feeling in our hearts is because a new layer of what it means to be human is emerging. And we're getting past our tribal identity, whether that's communism or capitalism or Russia or America or left or right or black or white, whatever it is, that's all tribal. That's a level that produces wars because we demonize the other half of some duality and then we go to battle with them. But the next level of the human heart under the tribal is humanity as a whole, and all conflict between one part of humanity and another part causes suffering. And it's good that it does, because that suffering shows us like a layer of our humanity is emerging that wasn't there before. And as horrendous as it is that it's emerging, you look at somewhere like Ireland that suffered for decades this intense internal conflict over what? Religion and other things, but eventually their hearts said there's nothing worth this destruction. And how much suffering do we have to go through before the heart just says, no, I'm done, I've had enough? So I feel like that's the underneath everything, that's what's moving people. Their hearts are coming online because their humanity is emerging out of the core of the heart.
Yeah, that gives some hope. So we're facing growth pains.
Yeah, well, I think all emergence can be a painful process. It doesn't have to be, but I think because we've lived in a culture that's so separated off from the soul, that it's coming in a suffering way. Because of course, it's not just humanity. You know, we're busy fighting this narcissistic war, whatever it is, and the whole biosphere is struggling. So the next level after humanity is the one life of Earth, you know, that is going to emerge in our hearts as well. So, you know, we're going to have to go through this initiation, this awakening one way or another. And it's as much an inside job as an outside job, you know. I don't know if you know, all of these layers of consciousness work that talk about we move from egocentric to you know, family. So we start loving ourselves, and then we have our family, and then we have our, you know, our country, and then we have our you know, tribe, our religion, whatever. Then we have humanity, and then we have the planet. The only trouble with that emergence is that most people never get out far enough, and they always contract back when there's crisis. So they may intellectually have a world-centric view, but when it comes to their neighbor, you know, doing something at their fence, all of a sudden they're back to a very egocentric view. So I think the thing that people don't understand is that this expansion of self from egocentric to world-centric to cosmocentric is also inside us. So it's not like we take a self and that self just expands its awareness. That self is also inside, just like the earth has layers like crust and mantle and core, so that the psyche and the heart has layers. So it's just not that our consciousness is expanding to become world-centric or humanity-centric. Our heart is coming online with our self that is humanity. And so that means humanity as a being is emerging in every heart. And that's hopeful. And it's painful, because when it emerges in yourself, you suffer as humanity suffers. It's you're not just the center of your own life anymore. Humanity has got a place in your heart. And when that being is undergoing suffering, when its heart is calling out, your heart suffers. And that is how it's going to emerge. That's how it's going to emerge in all of us, because if we let that, you know, and many people try to repress that, and that's why we have such mental health issues on the planet and so on. But it's coming from the inside of us as well as from the outside. It might look like, oh, if we could just stop the fighting out there. But what do you do about that line of good and evil in every human heart? What do you do about the conflict that's happening inside each person and every family? So the emergent process of love is not an intellectual process. It's a heartfelt process. It's opening ourselves and allowing ourselves to listen to the being that is humanity as it's vibrating in our own heart.
How do we help it? How do I help it?
I think the first thing is to stop and feel, like to really feel, because one of the ways that we avoid feelings, particularly if we have good minds, is to go into mentality. We go into ideology. We go into right and wrong. We go into who's to blame. We go into, you know, I would say that for the last 50 years, how many, particularly men, sit around in suits and ties in around big tables all through Europe and all over the world, having another conference, having another conversation, sit around the UN, sit around, and we all know that that long-term mental debate and dialogue is stuck. It's stuck because the mind can always take a perspective. The mind can, okay, we can take this perspective and then someone can take the opposite and we can argue and yes, and then someone tries to have an even bigger perspective that includes the last two perspectives. But the heart is the part that just says it's direct knowledge. It's direct wisdom. It isn't intellectual knowledge. It's a wisdom that the heart says something must be done. It's the heart that comes along and says, it's not okay that children are dying under bombs. It's just not okay. I don't care what the ideology is. I don't care what the latest intellectual thing that wants to lull me into telling me, if I just understood the geopolitical history of Russia and the US and everything that's been going on, then it would all make sense. People are dying. They're killing each other. That is true. That is unacceptable. That doesn't need intellectualism. It needs hearts that stand up and express their grief and express their rage and express their pain and are unwilling to accept that this is who we are as humanity. They're unwilling to accept it. That's what makes people truly stand up. It's not some ideology telling them to go fight for their country and kill someone in another country. It's humanity standing up their heart for what is good. And even on the battlefield, we can just hope that confronted with life-death situations, that humanity still can emerge inside a human heart. You're going to have a choice. You have a choice to listen to your heart or to listen to your mind. So somewhere in all of this, I feel like the first step is to not distract into right and wrong and go to opinion. I mean, the internet is full of people's opinions, and then someone has an opinion and someone has someone else's opinion. Even our media is full of opinions, but to go to the heart first, to feel the heartbreak of what's actually happening. And then when the heart's felt, then the mind can start to come in service of the heart. And that's why I love what you're doing, because it's a heartfelt initiative. Your heart is saying, I can't live with this. I have to do something. And so at least doing something is engaging the heart and expressing that and then trying to get understanding. But I feel like the most difficult step for most people is to face the experience with their heart first. And it's not easy because we're taught to shut down our feelings. We're taught to shut down our soul. We're taught to shut down our shared humanity and be realistic. That's not how the world works. You know, every child is basically told, kill off your soul as fast as possible because you know, this world is a harsh place, and you need to get savvy. You need to have, you know, smarts. But that's just because the generation before us and the generation before us were working on their hearts. And I think it's time now. We have no choice. It's time for the heart. So that's the first step. And I have a lot of faith actually in Russia in this. Because from the esoteric teachings, it said that Russia not only has an Aquarian soul, same as America, but it said that the New World religion is going to come out of that culture. And I think there is a quality, there's a secret hidden in the core of the Russian soul that's about brotherhood, that's about the secret communion of life between all beings. And the world needs that to emerge. And if this is the suffering, and if this is the last gasp of you know, whatever needs to move through so that secret can be revealed, then it's not just about humanity. It's not about love for each other. It's also love for all life. the secret communion that we share with all other beings on this planet is a communion of life. And I think that is part of the Russian soul to bring forward. I don't know how. It looks like a long way away at the moment. And it seems strange that, all of these ideological ideas that are based on communism, that we are one with our brother and sister, tend into totalitarian regimes where a few people dominate everybody else with that idea that we should all be blah, 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 So somewhere that has got to come from the heart, the deep upwelling that's underneath everything that I think is part of the Russian psyche is there is deep love there. And so how to express that love without taking that into battle, I think is a deep, deep question.
It feels a little bit like, maybe it will sound strange, but it's like the current situation looks like a revelation of something hidden. At first, we're gonna raise it to surface and look at this dehumanization before we can actually start feeling more human. And to me, it's like Russians dehumanizing Ukrainians right now, Americans dehumanizing Russians, I don't know, Republicans, libertarians, housewives, you're just a little bit separate from everybody, and it feels like right now we're in this heartbreak at realizing it. And I hope that this will help us feel that when I'm dehumanizing someone in front of me, I'm losing my own humanity. I'm becoming a little bit less of a human with each step like that.
Yeah. And of course, it's actively done, isn't it? That poor young people fighting wars have often been told dehumanizing stories and patriotic stories in order to encourage them. I mean, it's Anzac Day here in New Zealand. And that was the day that our naive young men all went off to Gallipoli to fight for the British Empire, and that bravely marched off to war, and then they were basically just mowed down like cattle in the trenches, pushed forward as cannon fodder for the guns. And something in the psyche of this nation woke up at that point. Something woke up that said, that's just not what we're going to do. We're not going to march off on some journey of glory and have, New Zealand on the other side of the world. Every town in New Zealand has war memorials for their loss in that time. And for what? They gathered, they managed to claim a piece of territory for about a day, and then it was taken from them and they were all slaughtered, so for what? So this thing that we all know is, it's not the people that are fighting the wars that are causing the wars. At least in the old days, if somebody was, you had a champion, someone would ride out and they would meet someone else with a sword or whatever, and for the whole kingdom, and it was a big drama. But now the leaders are sitting behind. They're not in the front. They're behind with computers and cleverness and dropping bombs and drones on people who are on the front line are losing their lives. So this, even from a warrior mentality, this lack of honor, this lack of heart of even how to battle is just so wrong. And that if you strip the uniform off the Ukrainian and the Russian soldiers that are bent on killing each other, they've got a lot more in common than they have with their leaders. So part of the great spirit, I think, that of Russia is that the man in the street, the worker or the whatever, is not going to just be pushed into serving the ideology of some, elite. And And we need that balance, because what's happened in America and capitalism and so on is the world has become so I-centric, so individualistic. Everybody with their own Facebook page and their own opinion and their own gender pronoun and their own everything is just, you have to respect me. I've got my own, unique identity that I am at the center of the world. And okay, that's one half of the truth, but the other half of the truth is our shared humanity is at our core. It's at our center. And so somewhere, I hope in this, there's going to be a recognition by the people who are doing the suffering in the wars of the stupidity of it and the refusal to enact this drama for largely old men and their ideologies that need to be gone from the planet now.
We're talking about feeling it all, and I'm sitting with the deepest heartache and heartbreak, and I've been sipping in all the news, emotions, and stories, just watching them, seeing them, and it's exhausting. It's hard. Yeah. I see it in myself, and I see it in some people around me a lot, is that we are freezing, we are feeling helpless and exhausted, and it's like lying down in a puddle, disenchanted with the world. How do we stand up? What can help us?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is, I love what you're doing is not looking away. Like we live such a distracted, disassociated world, and to not look away is important, and it's hard. I remember one time I was just flicking through Facebook, and a picture came across my Facebook of a young Indian girl who had been raped and hung from a mango tree, and I couldn't do anything for the rest of my day. Like I kept trying to shift my attention to somewhere else, but I couldn't, because my heart wouldn't let me. It wouldn't let me look away. And so I spent the day with this image, and the deepest work was to just not turn away, to let it in, and let it into the part of me that's a father and a grandfather, that this is my planet too, and that this is happening on my planet, and it's not okay with me. It's not okay with my heart. So if I stay with it, then I find empowerment. If I move away, then I move into disempowerment and go, well, what can I do anyway? There's nothing I can do. I best not even see. I best not even look. Why am I just tormenting myself with this war porn? Why don't I just get on and do the garden or something positive? Well, because there's some part of our humanity that needs to meet this. And the first thing that it needs to do is change us. Like that's the first piece of empowerment, because we automatically go to, well, how do I change the world? I can't change Putin or Trump, or maybe I'll start a political party or whatever. We go into our doing, and that's not the first move. The first move is to let it in. Its job is to open us. Its job is to vibrate in our hearts and open new territory, open our humanity, open our feelings. And maybe there's rage there that needs to be expressed. Maybe there's grief that needs to be wailed. Maybe there's just suffering that needs to be felt. But this is an organ. This is a powerful organ in our chest. It's can do a lot of work. And this is where our power comes from. We talk about love, and most people have very light, fluffy idea of love, but love is the most powerful force in the universe, and it comes through the center of our heart. So when we're being impacted by something, the first thing is to let it open us. And then I guarantee that underneath the rage and the suffering and the feeling of powerlessness will come a place where love starts to move. And you need to follow where love moves. And that's what you're doing. You know, you're following where love moves. You're doing something because love is doing it. If you move out of frustration or out of anger or out of, you know, suffering or out of hopelessness, you'll just create more hopelessness and suffering and anger. But if you do the work of opening the heart and letting yourself be penetrated till you find the love at the core of your heart, because that's why I took a day with that raped girl, because it took me a day to find my love for the rapist. It took me all fucking day of raging and grieving and to find that place in the core of my heart that did not want to just stop it and tear down, that actually could feel love. That is the most important work. You know, because our great pastime on the planet at the moment is to blame someone, anyone out there, them, they, you know, and they're battling it out in the ethers. And the hardest thing to do is to be the they, to find the Putin inside us, to find the prejudices and the bigotries and the bullies and the cowardness and all of that comes up when we have to confront it. But then we can also find the power of our hearts and our power to do something that is a pure response that meets what is not loving with love, that finds a way for love to meet it. And there's something about love that can embrace it all. It can embrace what we do to each other, what we're doing to the planet. Well, but, you know, like there's so many things to break our hearts over. The war just puts it in our face, you know, but it's forcing humanity to come into its heart and to hopefully find that power of love that's there. So that's the first thing. Don't look away. Do the inner work of meeting it and then feeling it and then moving those feelings to get to what's underneath it, which will always be a loving response. Then your mind doesn't tell you what to do. Your heart tells you what to do. And maybe it's reaching out to somebody. Maybe you don't even know what it is, right? Until you get down to the bottom of the well, you don't know what the action's going to be. And for me, some of the purest and most beautiful and empowering actions I've ever made have come from that bottom of the well where I've done my work.
What is love, Bruce? It's not this fluffy, warming thingy. Okay, I'm gonna go and hug all rapists.
Yeah. Well, the thing about love is that it isn't, that there's layers of it, you know, and we get stuck just like in our egocentric worldview. We get stuck in the layers, and because we don't really grow our hearts. So if you want to grow your mind, you go to a university and you study algebra, and then when you've studied algebra, you study calculus, and you know, so our minds that are developed can encompass greater and greater concepts. And yet we treat our hearts as if they're supposed to just, you know, come online instantly. They don't need work, that we can keep them safe our entire life. And then someone's going to come along and love us unconditionally and happy ever after. I mean, talk about a naive understanding of what the heart is and of what love is. And it's no wonder that we have these romantic, fluffy ideas of love, because we haven't matured our hearts. Our hearts haven't done the work of breaking open. To be a lover, to learn how to love, means you've got to risk annihilation, and time after time after time you have to risk heartbreak. And it's through the breaking of your heart that your heart grows, because for love to be what it really is, which is the most powerful energy in the universe, a wild, untamable force that spins galaxies as well as making people gaga over each other, that love that brings us together and unites us is terrible. You know, it's a terrible power because it strips everything that's not love away. but you don't get to touch the fire without doing the work. So you start with self-love, and then you learn through projection with another being how to actually have a thou, because at the beginning, love is very selfish. It just wants something for itself. And then that love has to learn how to, at least in relationship, give as much as it gets, and then turn the other person into a thou, and then have consideration for your tribe and your country. And like, love is grows. So love is not a noun, it's a verb. It's an action. It's a movement of energy that, as it moves like a river moving through the center of your heart, it opens more and more until it's a wild, raging force of love. So love is so many different things, but the kind of love that I think the world needs is not the light, fluffy love that just says, oh, okay, everyone had a wounded childhood and everybody is suffering, so we should just accept and love everything. That kind of fluffy, naive love just means that those who use power are justified not being loving because the lovers don't want power. So unifying love and power to actually be able to be powerful, which means to set boundaries, which means, if necessary, to kill. You can kill out of love. It's not about being a pacifist, but it's not about blocking your heart and going to ideology or going to might or going to dominance or going to some other place. Love embraces death and suffering and all things. It's the power that can hold everything that's in the human condition and not look away and not shut its heart. So that love lives in each of us, which is why we have to do the work of going through all of those different layers till we find unconditional love. And most people who study meditation, for example, are familiar with non-duality in consciousness, which means you start with an I and then you go into, group soul, and then you eventually go into emptiness or nothingness. But the heart's the same. You start with personal love, and then you develop, love for other, and maybe love for your clients or, for humanity. And then right at the very core, that kind of love that I think we need on the planet is love without an object. It's not love because it's returned, it's connecting you and me or me and something, even cosmos. It's love just because that's at the core of the heart. Just love without subject, love without object, love because that is what lives at the core of every heart. So my answer to love is who you are when you've stripped everything down that's in the way. And all of the stories about are gone. And that's why tragically love sometimes comes up during intense crisis like war. Because if you're, in an apartment and a bomb's landed and you have your partner there and you have your own survival instincts going, you don't have time to meditate. You don't have time to look to see what some great world teacher said about what to do in a situation like that. You don't have time for mindfulness. You have to decide right then, in that moment, life or death, what is important to you, what matters to you, what lives at the core of your being, and who are you when you are tested in the face of life and death. And that's when we find out what love is, or we find out what we're not capable of yet of loving. So love is what shows up when everything else is stripped away and there's nothing left except between you and your divine nature. That's love.
It kind of burns.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going.
Yeah, I think so.
Feels like a worthy direction.
Yeah. And I guess we're going to go there one way or another. You know, we're either going to go there in a dying biosphere with, you know, population dramas and wars, and we're going to go there. It doesn't so much matter about the outcome. What matters is that this is the journey. I feel like the earth has produced the human species as part of this journey, and that we're about to be tested. You know, we're going through a near-death experience, just like somebody does when they have a heart attack and they have to confront their you know, lifestyle, that the planet is giving us now this, okay, it's time to be tested. What have you learned about love? And in crisis, what will show up? Will you show up as love? And, you know, my hope is that on the other side of this war, the heart of humanity will come out stronger, and we'll turn towards the things that matter, and we'll have them enshrine more deeply in our heart. We'll have them engraved more deeply about what matters, and we'll meet this in ourselves. So I feel like we're going one way or another. Like, it's not a choice anymore. It's not like the 60s where you can decide whether you know, go on your journey to find yourself or not. It's like, it's the levels of crisis on the planet are such that inside or outside, whether it's coming from the outside or whether it's coming from the inside, and global depression. I mean, I don't know, I saw the statistics the other day, something like 20% of Americans now are on antidepressants of some kind. Like, I think that was the statistic. It's like, we can't shut down this crisis. It's coming. It's emerging out of the core of our being, and it's emerging from the confrontation with climate change and all of whatever your belief system is. There is crisis emerging for humanity. And that crisis is going to, you know, the next level of emergence has to be humans not being human-centric. So, you know, the age of the Anthropocene, the age of humanity being at the core and causing species annihilation and so on, that needs to move to world-centric. So humans have to take themselves out of the narcissistic center of the picture. You know, but we're not even there yet. We're not even to one humanity yet. We're fighting tribal wars between two countries that are brothers and sisters way more than they are enemies. So we're still in the tribal battle. We haven't even got to one humanity. And then the planet's asking us to make the next jump to the next ring, which is take your special, you know, entitled human self out of the center of the frame. And look at all of the species that you share the planet with. Look at the cosmos that you're in. Look at the beauty and the splendor and the glory. Come up from your stock portfolio and your Facebook page and have a look around. You know, you have to move. You fast now. So, you know, just like in your own personal growth, you know, sometimes you pop out to a new level and then all of a sudden you regress, you know, you're back, you know, at 10, or you're sucking your thumb and you're like, how did I get back here? I thought I was enlightened and I was growing, and now I'm like, I'm in some childhood trauma. Well, it's because as you grow, your capacity to integrate parts of you that haven't known love yet increases. So hopefully this war is like a regression. It's like a fall back into tribalism. One last, you know, trip to the alcohol before we realize we want to give it up. You know, maybe it's going to be that, because the bigger picture has to not only come to one humanity. We've got to get past humanity to one planet. So that's the real challenge, I think, is ahead.
Yay. There's simultaneously an opening and looking forward, and also like, yikes, such a long journey, but kind of right here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that's also part of the, you know, the journey humanity is on is also the journey that we're all on individually. And we go through stages when our soul's awakening, where we have to face trauma from the past, you know, because we become more sensitive. One of the, if you go on your journey, you become more sensitive, and more things affect you. And so trauma is the big thing in the world, and countries have trauma too, you know, like Russia has trauma, incredible trauma. Like one of the things that was amazing for me from New Zealand, coming from this little country down in the South Pacific, that, you know, we often, you know, when they look at how you vote on the UN, for example, New Zealand always votes in the favor of the good of the whole, because we're so little. Our self-interest, you know, is not going to work. We have to choose the best for everyone so that we get included, you know. But if you're a superpower, or if you're a big country or whatever, you've got not only a lots of history, but you've also got lots of ego and lots of drive and so on. So countries have souls, and they have trauma, and they have past. And just as, you know, you go on a journey, and then all of a sudden your stuff of your parents are coming up, and your stuff of, you know, your past relationship is surfacing, and so on. So I think, you know, whatever is going on is also touching into something that is a collective trauma. You know, it's a collective trauma of war and domination and abuse and all of those things. And it's an opportunity for that to really move in the psyche of not only of the countries of Russia and Ukraine, but for everyone. Everybody is affected. And not affected the way the politicians would have us believe, that it's like, you know, you need to stop it now, otherwise it's going to spread or whatever, but affected because this is us. You can't get to play, if you want to be humanity, you can't get to play the country game for long. It can't be like those people over there in Russia or in Ukraine, or, you know, New Zealand would never do that, because we're just this kind, nice little nation down in the south. But of course, if we were there, then humans are the same anywhere. You take a bunch of humans from any country in the world and crash land them in the Andes, and they're eating themselves pretty fast, or they're, you know, in trauma or response. So it's a human problem. It's not a Ukrainian Russian problem. And the sooner we take that on and listen and get the wake up call where we say, I thought we were over this. I thought we didn't do war anymore. I thought that, well, then we're actually confronted with the fact that we do. You know, and I loved James Hillman's last book that he ever wrote. And he said all of his life was building up. He was a depth psychologist. And his last book was Our Terrible Love of War. And he was saying that humanity tries to make war and peace opposites, and they're not, you know, and war and love aren't opposites. It's all love, but war is just a very, you know, it's a very terrible way to come to love.
To see?
So our love of war is a love of intensity. We want to wake up. And we are putting ourselves in intense situations. And it's a terrible way to do it. It's like watching someone, I don't know if you know someone, probably in Russia, you know, lots of people who like go to the bottle to hit bottom. You know, and of course they're looking for spirit, and they've misinterpreted spirit as something that you can buy at the local, you know, liquor store. And they go to the bottom because at the level of the bottom of the bottle is a level of intensity that they need to experience in order to wake up. And it's terrible when you're watching people who are that addicted, but there's some kind of, you know, wisdom there. And the wisdom is a trauma wisdom, that you can't solve trauma from a lesser level of intensity than when it was created. Mm-hmm. So in other words, we seek out intensity of experience so that we can reset our traumas. And I think nations do that as well. It's just that war is a kind of unconscious way of doing that, of generating the level of intensity that we then wake up from later. And we don't have to do it that way. We can do it by consciously engaging the level of intensity, by trying to reach towards what our potential is. And when we can't reach it and we're dragged back by some part of our own being, then we feel the intensity, we feel the burn. So I feel like this is kind of a hopefully unconscious way of feeling the level of intensity that's needed to get past some trauma in the soul of that part of the world, and maybe all of ours.
So it's a chance to push a reset button and record the new history on the scar.
Yeah, there's a chance whenever you are at that a bottom place, a place of deep despair, that's when you say never again. I mean, that's what they did at the end of the Second World War, right? You know, how many wars is it? The war to end all wars until the next one, you know? And so, but when there's been such an intense experience, such a loss of life, such a heartbreak, that's when we say this can't happen again. That's when we say I'm giving up alcohol forever. That's when we come to a point of crisis and tension that allows change to take place. And I don't know if you know this in your life, I certainly know it in my life, that there have been a couple of points in my life where I had to use my will. And afterwards, I knew that point was a before and after point. There was before that point, there was after that point. And what made the difference was me using my will in that crisis. And you find resources in those moments of intense crisis that you don't find otherwise. So I do feel like there's reason for hope, but it's not a naive reason. And it actually requires that nations, like people, use their will at times of crisis to see through and reset and choose something different and actually change, you know. And that's probably the biggest difficulty on the planet. We all know what needs to happen in order to have a sustainable future for humanity. We all know, but there doesn't seem to be the collective will. And this is a political issue as well as the inner politics of every human being. I would say the one area of life, apart from money, the one area of life that people have the least respect for in the world is politics, because that's now become a recognition that the power that's supposed to live at the core of statesmanship and governance and so on has become corrupted. It's become self-interested. It's become, you know, run by other things. And so that, of course, makes us all have to come back to ourselves and say, what's my politics? Not what party do I vote for or what ideology, but what do I do when it really matters? How do I live my principles in my own life? And how much slack do I cut myself? Or do I actually decide that I'm going to live from the deepest place that I know how and be in integrity with myself? So these are questions we all face on our journey, right? And somewhere the access requires a will. If you're going to change, and if you're going to make lasting change, you need to use your will. So hopefully this war may produce a deep change.
Yes, let's hope.
Yeah. And of course, that doesn't take anything away from the people who are paying the price in the front line of that change. It doesn't make it okay. It doesn't change the reality of the suffering. It doesn't paint it with a rosy picture that it's all for the good. No, it's not. It's terrible. And it's heartbreaking. But if it's happening and we have to meet it with our hearts, at least let it matter. Let it make something different.
Thank you, Bruce.
Mm.
Maybe before we go, we can spend some time in feeling. You can guide us into something you would feel help us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, maybe what I'd like to do is just take us on a little heart journey, because I think it's the heart that has come up in our conversation, so yeah, I invite you to just go into your heart. And this is a sensing meditation, so it's not about consciousness, it's about sensing your heart center. And my experience of the heart is that there's like 3 rings or layers to the heart. It's like a big dartboard or something. And so one of the ways to sense and feel that first ring is your personal love. So I just invite you to sense with your heart, feel with your heart, those beings that you have personal love for, maybe a partner or a child, parent. And the heart's an organ of feeling. So if you can allow the feeling to be there in your heart, so bring that image, that's whatever image comes to you of someone that you personally love. Maybe you could feel, who have you let most deeply into this personal ring of your heart? Who have you entrusted with some of its deeper mysteries and treasures? Who have you given the key to be in your heart, to be connected to your personal heart? And I'm wanting you to just really notice how that feels, the sensation of being in love. It doesn't need to be romantic love. How it makes your heart feel to love and be loved personally. And then we come into the next ring, which is the transpersonal ring. So still having that personal ring active, come into something that's a little bit more abstract. It might be your love of mathematics, or your love of classical music, or your love of nature. Or your love of your country, or of beauty, or so just let this middle ring of your heart activate and feel what is it to love beyond the personal. Your transpersonal love can also be for your students or your teachers or for great artists that have walked the planet. Maybe you've never even met this person, but their writing touched you, or the music that they made, or and this is the realm also that the heart opens in its religious and mystical. Maybe it's you have a relationship with Jesus or Buddha or the aliens or whoever it is that your heart feels a direct mystical union or bond with. Those times where someone's come for you, it's not personal, but it's transpersonal. And then see if you can come into the very bullseye of the heart, the very center. Where here there's not love of anything. It's not love of God or the planet or a person. There's no you, there's no one else, there's just love. And notice how this love is just inherent in your core. It's not because of anything outside. And this love can meet anything. Can embrace anything because all things are held in this love. And then see if you can feel these three layers of your heart like a fountain. Either inner love flows into the transpersonal ring and that flows into the personal ring so that your whole heart is resourced and filling with that love for no reason, love without object. And then when you can feel your heart full of all those three levels, then bring the war, bring the situation that's happening between Russia and Ukraine, bring it into your heart and just let that love meet it. And whatever else that feels overwhelming or that you're not able to face, could be the species annihilation or could be your something personal, like a relationship with your mom, or it could be politics or money shortages, or whatever it is that you feel overwhelmed by and disempowered by. Just keep bringing it to that core of your heart and letting love, the love that you are, meet it. And just sit with that for a few minutes and just allow whatever feelings need to move and come up. Just keep pouring the love that's at the core of your heart into whatever disempowers you. And now coming back to the war for a moment, again, connect your heart to the whole issue of the war. And this time you're going to seek your heart wisdom. What can love do? And again, you're not in your mind, you're in your heart, and it's a sensation, it's a feeling. If you can let your heart guide you. What action can you take? What can you do that comes out of your love that you can meet this war with? Just take a few moments to feel that and check it out, the sensation. What increases that love in your heart? What is a loving response that you can make? It's guided by your heart wisdom and brings your power to meet this crisis. Hey, thank you. I just want to make the point that the heart is an organ of action. It's not just an organ of feeling. And deep, empowered action can come from the heart if you are quiet enough to listen to it. And it's not just a question of sending love to people through your heart. Of course, you can do that if you want to, but the heart can tell you what to do, not the mind. The heart can tell you what to do that comes from love. And it can be surprising. I know when I ask my heart what to do, sometimes I can't figure out why. Like I just recently did a piece about wanting to know what to do with supporting with money somewhere. And so I asked my heart, and my heart came out with bees. My heart came out with bees, and it took me on a whole journey until my heart was like this hive of bees buzzing, and it didn't make sense to me until it did. And then when it made sense, I'm like, oh my God, that I could never have come up with that with my mind. That was an image, and Henry Corbin talked about himmer, the himmer of the heart, which is image. The heart feels in an image. That's why a great novelist or a great musician, like you feel the image of the heart. It's what motivates people. It can rouse a nation, the heart. It's not passive, it's active and dynamic. So I just don't think we have learned how to go to the heart to get instruction, and I think that that's the future politics, is the politics of the heart, not of the mind. It's not councils sitting around talking for another, generation. It's heart politics. So yeah, hopefully there'll be some taste or flavor of how to go to the heart to get guidance.
Thank you for your help.
Thank you, Katia. It was a beautiful journey of meeting this whatever was alive out of the meeting, and I'm touched by the dialogue and the heartfelt nature of it. Like, feel your love and your care, and this is coming from your heart's wisdom about what to do something that can increase the power of your love. So thanks for including me, and it was a delight to dance with you.
Yes. I have enjoyed it. It was happy to see you. Have a beautiful day.
You too.